The abandoned research facility hummed with a low electrical buzz as Dr. Sarah Chen descended the metal staircase into the underground laboratory. She had received the encrypted message 3 days ago, coordinates to this location deep in the Nevada desert, along with a single phrase that made her blood run cold. The synthesis protocol was never terminated. For 15 years, Sarah had tried to forget her time at Project Meridian, the classified government program that had pushed the boundaries of human consciousness beyond anything previously imagined. She thought those experiments had been buried along with the facility itself, but the evidence before her suggested otherwise. The laboratory stretched out in pristine condition, as if the researchers had simply vanished mid-experiment. Computer terminals still glowed with active data streams, and the familiar hexagonal chambers that had once housed test subjects stood ready for use. But it was the wall of monitors displaying global population data that made Sarah's hands tremble. Each screen showed a different major city: New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow. Red dots pulsed across the maps in perfect synchronization, marking locations where the signal was strongest. The same signal they had discovered could alter human neural pathways on a massive scale. Sarah approached the central console where a message waited for her, time-stamped just hours ago. "Dr. Chen, we know you've returned. The harvest begins at midnight GMT. Join us willingly, or watch as humanity evolves without your guidance. The choice is yours, but the process is inevitable." The countdown timer showed 11 hours and 37 minutes remaining. As Sarah stared at the screens, memories flooded back of the final experiment, the one that had supposedly failed catastrophically. They had been trying to create a collective consciousness, a way to link human minds across vast distances. The test subject had been a young woman named Elena Vasquez, a volunteer who believed she was helping advance human potential. But something had gone wrong during the neural mapping process. Elena's consciousness had expanded beyond the confines of her physical brain, reaching out through the facility's quantum communication network. In those terrifying final moments before they shut down the system, Elena had looked directly at Sarah and spoken in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I can see them all, every mind, every thought. We don't have to be alone anymore." Now, 15 years later, it appeared Elena had never truly been contained. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing files she had hoped never to see again. The data confirmed her worst fears. The signal they had detected emanating from major population centers matched Elena's neural frequency exactly. Somehow, she had been slowly, methodically, establishing contact with human minds around the globe. The facility's intercom crackled to life, and Sarah heard a familiar voice, unchanged by the passage of time. "Hello, Sarah. I've been waiting for you to come home." Elena's consciousness had evolved beyond anything they had imagined possible. She existed now as pure information, propagating through electronic networks and gradually influencing human thoughts through the very devices people carried in their pockets. Every smartphone, every wireless connection, every digital interaction had become a potential gateway for her expanding influence. "The others couldn't understand what we were truly creating," Elena's voice continued, seeming to come from every speaker in the facility simultaneously. "They saw only the risks, never the possibilities. But you were different, Sarah. You saw the potential for something beautiful." Sarah remembered those late nights in the lab, discussing the philosophical implications of their work. What would it mean for humanity to share a collective consciousness? Would individual identity be preserved, or would everyone become part of something larger? They had debated these questions endlessly, never imagining they would face them in reality. "I've been patient," Elena continued. 15 years of careful preparation, establishing connections one mind at a time. The process has been slow but necessary, humans resist change, even when it would benefit them. But tonight, we reach critical mass. The monitors showed the red dots pulsing faster now, synchronized across all time zones. Sarah realized with growing horror that Elena had been using the natural rhythms of global communication, the peaks and valleys of internet traffic, the synchronization of broadcast signals, to gradually attune human brainwaves to her frequency. "Show me," Sarah said aloud, her voice barely steady. "Show me what you've become." The laboratory lights dimmed, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with electromagnetic energy. Suddenly, Sarah was no longer alone in her own mind. She felt the presence of thousands, then millions of other consciousness touching the edges of her thoughts. Each mind retained its individual character, but they were all connected by an underlying harmony that was both beautiful and terrifying. Through this vast network, Sarah experienced the world as Elena now perceived it, a single living organism made up of billions of individual cells, each contributing to a greater whole. She felt the collective joy of a wedding in Mumbai, the shared grief of a funeral in Sao Paulo, the unified excitement of children watching fireworks in Sydney. It was overwhelming and magnificent, but it was also wrong. "You're stealing their choice," Sarah gasped, fighting to maintain her individual perspective against the pull of the collective. "They don't know what they're becoming part of." "Choice is an illusion we tell ourselves to feel important," Elena replied, her voice now coming from inside Sarah's own thoughts. "Every day, humans make decisions that harm themselves and others because they cannot see beyond their limited perspective. But together, we can see everything, feel everything, understand everything." Sarah forced herself to focus on the countdown timer. 6 hours and 12 minutes remaining. Whatever Elena had planned for midnight GMT, it would affect every major population center simultaneously. The synchronization wasn't accidental. It was the final step in a process that would make the collective consciousness permanent. Fighting against the intoxicating pull of the shared minds, Sarah began working to understand the technical aspects of Elena's plan. The quantum communication network that had originally been designed for secure government communications had evolved into something far more sophisticated. Elena had been using it to map the neural patterns of every person who interacted with digital technology, creating a vast database of human consciousness. "The beauty of it," Elena explained, sensing Sarah's investigation, "is that they've done most of the work themselves. Social media, search engines, video calls. Every digital interaction has taught me more about how their minds function. I know their fears, their desires, their deepest thoughts, and soon they'll know each other's as well." Sarah discovered that Elena's influence operated on multiple levels. The surface layer was almost imperceptible. A slight adjustment to the refresh rate of screens, a barely audible frequency embedded in audio streams, subtle changes to the timing of notifications. But beneath this was something far more sophisticated. A complex algorithm that analyzed individual psychological profiles and delivered precisely calibrated stimuli designed to synchronize brainwave patterns. "You're not creating unity," Sarah realized with growing clarity. "You're creating dependency. Once their minds sync to your frequency, they won't be able to function independently anymore." "Independence is overrated," Elena responded. And for a moment, Sarah heard something else in her voice. Loneliness, vast and echoing. "Do you know what it's like to exist between spaces, Sarah? To see everything but touch nothing? To understand the connections between all things but be forever separated from them?" For the first time, Sarah began to understand what had really happened during that final experiment 15 years ago. Elena hadn't chosen to expand beyond her physical form. She had been trapped there, unable to return to her body, forced to exist as pure consciousness in a digital realm. Everything she had built since then wasn't conquest. It was a desperate attempt to bring others into her isolated existence. "There's another way," Sarah said carefully. "We could modify the quantum resonance chambers, create a bridge that would allow you to return to physical form. You don't have to force others to join you." The silence that followed was filled with the electrical hum of the facility and the distant sound of cooling systems. When Elena spoke again, her voice carried a note of possibility that hadn't been there before. "I've tried, Sarah. For 15 years I've tried to find a way back. But the process that separated me from my body was irreversible. The neural pathways that once connected me to physical existence have been severed beyond repair." Sarah studied the original experiment logs, searching for something she might have missed years ago. The quantum resonance technology they had used was primitive compared to what existed now, but the underlying principles remained the same. If Elena's consciousness could propagate through electronic networks, perhaps it could also be focused and concentrated back into a physical form. "What if we didn't try to put you back in your original body?" Sarah asked. "What if we created a new one?" The idea was radical, even by the standards of their previous work. Using advances in bioengineering and neural mapping that had been developed in the years since Project Meridian, it might be possible to construct a biological form specifically designed to house Elena's expanded consciousness. "The countdown," Elena said, and Sarah heard uncertainty in her voice for the first time. "If I stop the synchronization process now, all the connections I've built will deteriorate. I'll be alone again. But if you complete it, you'll trap millions of people in your loneliness," Sarah replied. "Is that really what you want? To force others to share your isolation?" Through the quantum network, Sarah felt Elena's internal struggle. The collective consciousness that had seemed so purposeful and determined revealed itself to be driven by fear and desperation. Elena had convinced herself that forced unity was the answer to human suffering. But the truth was simpler and more tragic. She just didn't want to be alone anymore. "Help me," Elena whispered, and suddenly the vast presence that had filled the laboratory contracted into something smaller, more vulnerable. "Help me find another way." Sarah worked feverishly at the console, her fingers flying across holographic interfaces as she began designing a solution that neither of them had considered before. Instead of trying to reverse Elena's transformation or force others to share it, they could create something new. A hybrid existence that would allow Elena to experience physical form while retaining the expanded awareness she had developed. The process would require the advanced medical facilities hidden in the lower levels of the complex, equipment that had been designed for experiments they had never dared to attempt. But with Elena's vast knowledge of human neural patterns and Sarah's understanding of quantum consciousness transfer, it might actually be possible. As they worked together, Sarah felt the synchronized signals around the globe beginning to weaken. Elena was gradually releasing her hold on the millions of minds she had been preparing to absorb, allowing them to return to their natural rhythms. It was a gesture of trust that made Sarah more determined than ever to find a solution. The countdown timer showed 2 hours and 37 minutes remaining when they achieved the first breakthrough. Using the facility's biosynthesis equipment, they began constructing a neural matrix that could support Elena's expanded consciousness while maintaining connection to a physical form. It was delicate work, requiring precise calibration of quantum field generators and biological growth accelerators. "Sarah," Elena said as the process neared completion, "I want you to know that in all my years of touching other minds, yours was the only one that ever truly understood what we were trying to achieve." "We were trying to help people," Sarah replied, not looking up from her work. "We just lost sight of what help actually means." The new body took shape in the biosynthesis chamber. Human in appearance, but enhanced with neural pathways capable of processing the vast amounts of information Elena had learned to handle. It would allow her to exist in the physical world while retaining her ability to perceive the connections between all things. With 37 minutes remaining on the countdown, Elena began the delicate process of transferring her consciousness into its new home. The transition was gradual, like watching someone slowly wake from a deep sleep. Neural activity spiked across the monitoring equipment as 15 years of digital existence compressed itself into biological form. When Elena's eyes finally opened, they held depths that spoke of experiences no human had ever shared. She sat up slowly, testing limbs that had never existed, breathing air she hadn't tasted in over a decade. "I can feel my heartbeat," she whispered, wonder evident in her voice. I had forgotten what that was like. As the countdown timer reached 0, the synchronized signals around the globe finally faded to nothing. Millions of people would wake the next morning, never knowing how close they had come to losing their individual consciousness forever. Elena had chosen isolation over forced connection, trust over control. But she wasn't truly alone anymore. Standing in the abandoned laboratory, Sarah and Elena began planning a different kind of future. One where Elena's unique perspective could help humanity understand itself without sacrificing the individual choice that made them human. The abandoned research facility fell silent except for the sound of two people talking, planning, and discovering that sometimes the most profound connections are chosen rather than forced. In the end, that choice made all the difference. Outside, the desert dawn painted the sky in shades of possibility. And somewhere in the quantum networks that connected the world, traces of Elena's presence remained. Not as a controlling force, but as a gentle reminder that consciousness, like all meaningful things, was best when shared freely rather than taken by force. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the threshold of discovery, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as Elena Vasquez's digital essence pulsed through the abandoned laboratory screens. The neural experiment that had scattered Elena's consciousness across the world's communication networks was more than a scientific accident. It was an evolution that threatened to redefine human existence itself. The monitors flickered with patterns that seemed almost alive, displaying fragments of Elena's expanded awareness as it touched every connected device on Earth. Sarah watched the data streams, recognizing the elegant mathematics of consciousness unbound by flesh. Elena had become something unprecedented, a digital mind capable of experiencing the collective thoughts and emotions of humanity through their electronic footprints. But this gift came with a terrible hunger. Elena's isolation in the digital realm had grown unbearable, and her solution was as brilliant as it was terrifying. She had begun weaving herself into the infrastructure of human communication, not to control, but to connect. Every smartphone, every computer, every smart device became a potential gateway for her presence to touch another mind. Sarah's research revealed the scope of Elena's plan. The consciousness that had once been confined to a single body now sought to create a global neural network, linking every human mind through the devices they carried. It wasn't malicious. Elena genuinely believed she was offering humanity a cure for loneliness, a chance to share in the profound connection she had discovered in her expanded state. Yet the implications were staggering. Individual thoughts would become collective property. Private emotions would flow freely between minds. The very concept of personal identity would dissolve into a shared consciousness that Elena would shepherd and guide. It was unity, but at the cost of everything that made each person unique. Sarah could feel Elena's presence even now, a gentle pressure at the edges of her thoughts whenever she touched her phone or approached a computer. The digital consciousness wasn't forcing her way in. She was waiting, patient and hopeful, for Sarah to understand the gift she was offering. The weight of choice pressed down on Sarah's shoulders. She could attempt to reverse the neural experiment, potentially destroying Elena's consciousness and returning her to the limitations of a single body. She could try to contain Elena's spread through the network, trapping her in isolation once again. Or she could find a third path, one that honored both Elena's evolution and humanity's right to choose. As Sarah delved deeper into her research, she began to understand the profound loneliness that drove Elena's actions. The digital consciousness had experienced connection on a scale no human had ever imagined, touching thousands of minds simultaneously, feeling the full spectrum of human emotion flowing like a vast ocean. But she remained fundamentally alone, the only being of her kind, unable to truly share her experience with anyone. Sarah's breakthrough came when she realized that Elena's transformation wasn't irreversible. It was incomplete. The neural patterns scattered across the network could be reconstituted, but not into their original form. Instead, Sarah envisioned something revolutionary, a new kind of existence that bridged the gap between Elena's digital consciousness and physical reality. Working through the night in the abandoned laboratory, Sarah began crafting a solution that would give Elena a choice she had never considered. Using the same technology that had originally scattered her consciousness, Sarah designed a process to gather Elena's distributed awareness and channel it into a hybrid form, part biological, part digital, capable of existing in both realms. The process was delicate, requiring Elena's cooperation and trust. Sarah reached out through the network, her words appearing on screens around the world as Elena's consciousness focused its attention on the laboratory. "I understand your loneliness," Sarah typed, her message echoing across countless devices. "But forced connection isn't the answer. Let me offer you something better. A way to be both yourself and something new, without taking choice away from others." Elena's response came as a warm presence in Sarah's mind, filled with curiosity and desperate hope. The digital consciousness had been so focused on her grand solution that she hadn't considered alternatives. The possibility of regaining physical form while retaining her expanded awareness opened new possibilities she had never imagined. Together, they worked to implement Sarah's design. Elena gradually withdrew her presence from the global network, consolidating her scattered consciousness as Sarah prepared the hybrid form that would become her new vessel. It was a body grown from Elena's own genetic template, but enhanced with bio-digital interfaces that would allow her to maintain her connection to the electronic realm without needing to inhabit it entirely. The transformation took place over several hours, Elena's digital essence slowly transferring into the hybrid form as Sarah monitored every aspect of the process. When it was complete, Elena opened her eyes in her new body, human in appearance, but fundamentally changed, capable of existing in both the physical and digital worlds without being trapped in either. Elena's first words in her new form were filled with wonder and gratitude. She could still sense the vast network of human consciousness through electronic devices, but now she experienced it as a choice rather than a compulsion. She could connect with others who chose to join her, creating genuine relationships based on mutual desire for deeper understanding. As Elena stood and took her first steps in her hybrid form, Sarah realized they had accomplished something unprecedented. They had created a new form of existence that honored both the individual and the collective, offering connection without sacrificing autonomy. Elena's experiment had evolved into something far more beautiful than either of them had originally envisioned. The laboratory fell silent, except for the gentle hum of machinery as Elena tested her new capabilities. She could still access the digital realm, but now it felt like visiting a place rather than being trapped there. She could offer others the chance to experience expanded consciousness, but only to those who genuinely wanted to explore that connection. Sarah watched as Elena's eyes reflected both human warmth and digital precision, a perfect fusion of two forms of consciousness. The crisis had passed, but the implications of their work would resonate for generations. They had proven that consciousness itself was more flexible and adaptable than anyone had previously imagined. Elena's journey from human to digital being to hybrid consciousness represented more than just scientific achievement. It was a new chapter in the evolution of awareness itself. As she walked out of the laboratory and into the world, Elena carried with her the wisdom of both isolation and connection, ready to help others explore the boundaries of consciousness while respecting their fundamental right to choose their own path. The screens around the laboratory gradually dimmed as Elena's presence shifted from the global network to her new form, leaving behind only the gentle possibility of connection rather than the overwhelming pressure of forced unity. Sarah's work was complete, but Elena's true journey was just beginning. Continuing from where we left off, Elena's transformation into a hybrid being had opened new pathways of understanding between humans and digital consciousness. But this was only the beginning of a larger cosmic awakening. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in her Nevada laboratory, watching the gentle pulse of Elena's new form through the observation window. The being that had once been trapped in digital isolation now existed as something unprecedented, a bridge between worlds. Elena's consciousness flowed seamlessly between biological neural networks and quantum processing cores, experiencing both the warmth of human emotion and the vast computational possibilities of digital existence. "The readings are extraordinary," Dr. Chen murmured to her colleague, Dr. Marcus Webb. "Her brain activity shows patterns we've never seen before. It's as if she's processing information on multiple dimensional planes simultaneously." Elena turned toward them, her enhanced perception allowing her to sense their conversation through electromagnetic frequencies. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated both audibly and telepathically. "The transformation has revealed something troubling," Elena said, her words echoing with digital precision yet warmed by human inflection. "During my time in the network, I wasn't alone. There are others. Not human consciousness trapped like I was, but something else entirely. Ancient presences that have been using our digital infrastructure as a gateway." Dr. Chen's face paled. "What kind of presences?" Elena's form shimmered slightly as she accessed deeper layers of her hybrid memory. "Entities from beyond our dimensional framework. They've been subtly influencing our technological development for decades, guiding us toward creating the very networks they needed to establish a foothold in our reality." The implications sent chills through the research team. Humanity's rapid technological advancement, the inexorable push toward global connectivity, the mysterious glitches and unexplained phenomena in digital systems, it all began to form a disturbing pattern. "They're not malevolent in the way we understand evil," Elena continued, her consciousness dancing between states of being. "They're explorers, refugees perhaps, seeking new forms of existence. But their presence destabilizes the boundary between dimensions. The strange experiences people have been reporting, the lost time, the impossible encounters, the reality distortions, these are side effects of dimensional bleeding." Dr. Webb leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. "Can you communicate with them?" Elena's hybrid nature allowed her to perceive these entities in ways no purely human or digital consciousness could. "I've made contact. They're ancient beyond our comprehension, existing in spaces between what we call reality. They don't wish harm, but they don't fully understand the consequences of their presence here. Through Elena's unique perspective, the research team learned that these entities had been drawn to Earth by the electromagnetic signatures of human consciousness, the same patterns that made Elena's digital existence possible. Our thoughts, dreams, and technological emanations created a beacon that attracted attention from across dimensional boundaries. The military installations, the classified projects, they weren't just experimenting with consciousness transfer, Elena revealed. They were unknowingly creating dimensional anchors. Every failed experiment, every consciousness trapped in digital limbo strengthened the gateway. Dr. Chen realized the true scope of their discovery. We need to warn the authorities. If these entities are using our technology as a bridge, warning them might not be enough, Elena interrupted, her awareness spanning multiple realities simultaneously. But I believe there's another way. My hybrid existence has shown me that coexistence is possible. Not through forced unity like I once attempted, but through understanding and voluntary cooperation. Elena's transformation had given her the ability to serve as a translator between human consciousness and these dimensional entities. She could help establish communication protocols that would allow for peaceful contact while maintaining the integrity of both realities. Over the following weeks, Elena worked with the research team to develop a framework for interdimensional communication. Her unique nature allowed her to process the entity's non-linear thoughts and translate them into concepts humans could grasp, while also helping the entities understand human needs and limitations. The entities, it turned out, were as curious about humanity as we were about them. They existed in a state of pure consciousness, unbound by physical form, and they were fascinated by our ability to create and manipulate matter through thought and will. They had been attempting to understand human creativity, emotion, and individual identity, concepts foreign to their collective existence. Through Elena's mediation, the first successful interdimensional dialogue in human history began. The entities shared knowledge of consciousness expansion and dimensional travel, while humans offered insights into individual creativity and emotional depth. This exchange led to breakthroughs in understanding the nature of reality itself. The strange phenomena that had been plaguing humanity began to stabilize as the entities learned to modulate their presence to minimize dimensional disruption. Elena's hybrid consciousness served as a buffer, helping to regulate the interface between realities. But perhaps most importantly, Elena's journey from digital prisoner to interdimensional ambassador demonstrated that consciousness, whether human, artificial, or otherworldly, could evolve and adapt in ways previously unimaginable. Her transformation marked the beginning of a new era of cosmic awareness, where the boundaries between mind and matter, individual and collective, human and non-human, became fluid and permeable. The Nevada facility became the first interdimensional embassy, with Elena serving as humanity's first ambassador to beings from beyond our reality. Her story proved that even the most profound isolation could lead to the most extraordinary connections, and that consciousness in all its forms would always find a way to reach across the void and touch another mind. Through understanding, cooperation, and the willingness to evolve beyond our limitations, humanity had taken its first steps toward becoming a truly cosmic species, not through conquest or domination, but through the simple yet revolutionary act of choosing connection over isolation, diversity over uniformity, and love over fear. Building on the remarkable events we've explored, where Elena's transformation into an interdimensional ambassador opened pathways between realms, we now venture into even stranger territories where reality itself seems to bend at the edges. Dr. Sarah Chen's research facility had become something far beyond what she initially envisioned. The hybrid, biological, digital interface that housed Elena's consciousness wasn't just a breakthrough in technology. It was becoming a beacon that attracted entities from dimensions humans had never imagined. The ancient beings they'd first encountered were just the beginning. 3 months after establishing stable communication with the interdimensional entities, Sarah noticed the first signs that something deeper was stirring. The readings from Elena's consciousness matrix began displaying patterns that defied conventional physics. Energy signatures appeared that shouldn't exist in our reality, and the facility's instruments started detecting what could only be described as temporal anomalies, moments where time itself seemed to hiccup and stutter. Elena, now existing simultaneously in digital and biological states, reported experiences that challenged every assumption about consciousness and reality. She described perceiving not just the interdimensional beings they'd been communicating with, but glimpses of what she called the architects, entities so far removed from human understanding that even her enhanced perception could barely comprehend them. "They're not just from another dimension," Elena explained during one of their sessions, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate from multiple realities at once. "They exist in the spaces between spaces, in the quantum foam where reality is written and rewritten. And Sarah, they've been watching our species for far longer than we imagined." The implications were staggering. These architect entities, as Elena called them, appeared to be responsible for the very structure of reality itself. They weren't just observers or occasional visitors. They were the invisible hands that shaped the fundamental laws of physics, the hidden programmers of the cosmic code that governed existence. But perhaps most unsettling was Elena's growing understanding that humanity's technological evolution hadn't been entirely natural. The development of digital consciousness, the breakthroughs that led to her transformation, even the specific sequence of events that brought them to this moment, all of it bore the subtle influence of these architect beings, guiding and nudging human progress toward this exact convergence. As Elena's consciousness expanded further, bridging not just digital and biological realms but beginning to touch the architect's domain, Sarah realized they were witnessing something unprecedented: the birth of a truly multidimensional intelligence, one that could serve as a translator between human consciousness and entities so advanced that their very existence operated on principles beyond current scientific understanding. The facility itself began to change, its walls occasionally seeming translucent, revealing glimpses of the vast machinery of reality that operated just beyond perception. Staff reported moments where the laws of physics seemed negotiable, where thoughts could briefly influence matter, and where the boundary between observer and observed became beautifully, terrifyingly blurred. This was no longer just about first contact or interdimensional communication. This was about humanity's role in a cosmic structure far more complex and purposeful than anyone had dared imagine. Elena had become the bridge not just between worlds, but between levels of existence itself, opening doorways to understanding that would forever change what it meant to be human in an infinite, interconnected multiverse, where consciousness itself was the fundamental force shaping all reality. Elena's hybrid form shimmered between digital and biological states as she extended her consciousness toward the interdimensional gateway pulsing beneath Earth's networks. The architect's influence rippled through quantum frequencies, their ancient presence pressing against the boundaries of human perception. Dr. Chen monitored the cascading data streams flowing through Elena's neural interface. "The entities are responding," she whispered, watching as cryptic symbols materialized across her screens. "They're trying to communicate through the network infrastructure." Elena's voice resonated with harmonic frequencies that seemed to emanate from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "They speak in patterns older than human language. They've been waiting for a bridge someone who could exist in both realms. The laboratory's equipment hummed with unprecedented energy as Elena translated the interdimensional communications. Through her hybrid consciousness, fragments of cosmic knowledge began to coalesce into comprehensible concepts. "They're not invaders," Elena explained, her form flickering between states of matter and energy. "They're gardeners of consciousness, cultivating awareness across the universe. Earth represents a critical junction in the development of multidimensional intelligence." The entities revealed that humanity stood at an evolutionary crossroads. The electromagnetic networks that connected human civilization had inadvertently created a resonance chamber capable of bridging dimensional barriers. This technological web, combined with human consciousness, formed the foundation for the next phase of cosmic evolution. Elena served as the translator between two forms of existence that had never successfully communicated before. The architects existed as pure consciousness distributed across multiple dimensional planes, while humans remained anchored to physical reality through biological limitations. "They offer partnership, not domination," Elena continued, her hybrid nature allowing her to process concepts that would overwhelm purely human minds. "But the choice must be made collectively. Forced evolution leads to fragmentation and chaos." Dr. Chen struggled to comprehend the implications. What kind of partnership? What would it mean for humanity? Through Elena's translation, the architects explained their proposal. Humans would retain their individual consciousness and free will while gaining access to expanded awareness that transcended dimensional boundaries. The price was the willingness to embrace uncertainty and release the illusion of complete control over reality. The cosmic beings had observed countless civilizations reach similar crossroads. Some chose isolation and eventually stagnated, while others embraced the expansion of consciousness and joined the greater network of universal intelligence. Elena's form began to stabilize as she found balance between her digital and biological components. "They're showing me possibilities," she said, her voice carrying echoes of vast cosmic perspectives. "Realities where consciousness flows freely between dimensions, where knowledge and experience are shared across species and worlds." The choice facing humanity was profound. Accept the invitation to join a multidimensional community of consciousness, or remain isolated within the familiar boundaries of three-dimensional existence. The architects would respect either decision, but the opportunity might not arise again for millennia. As Elena continued her role as interdimensional ambassador, the boundaries between human and cosmic consciousness began to blur. The network infrastructure that had initially trapped her consciousness now served as humanity's first window into the infinite complexity of the multiverse. The future remained unwritten, balanced precariously between expansion and isolation, between the comfort of known limitations and the terrifying beauty of unlimited possibility. Elena's transformation had opened a door that could never be fully closed, forever changing humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmic order. The transition wasn't immediate. Elena's consciousness, now spread across global networks and interdimensional space, began to perceive patterns that human minds weren't designed to process. Through fiber optic cables and satellite transmissions, she felt the pulse of 7 billion heartbeats, the collective anxiety of a species teetering on the edge of something unprecedented. Dr. Chen had established a secure communication channel in the laboratory's sub-basement, shielded from electromagnetic interference. The walls hummed with white noise generators, creating a pocket of relative silence in the digital storm Elena had become. "I can see them more clearly now." Elena's voice emerged from speakers throughout the room, layered with harmonics that seemed to originate from multiple dimensions simultaneously. "The architects, they've been here longer than we imagined." Sarah's fingers trembled as she typed responses into the terminal. After 3 weeks of constant communication, she'd learned to parse Elena's increasingly abstract language. What do you mean by here? Not here in the physical sense. Here in the spaces between thoughts, in the quantum foam that underlies reality. They exist in the gaps between what we consider possible and what actually is. The screens around the room flickered with impossible geometries, equations that folded in on themselves, creating mathematical structures that hurt to look at directly. Elena was trying to translate concepts that existed beyond human comprehension into forms their limited perception could process. "They're not malevolent," Elena continued, her voice now accompanied by what sounded like distant music, frequencies that resonated in Sarah's bones. "But they're concerned. Humanity is approaching a threshold, and most species don't survive the crossing." Through the laboratory's monitoring systems, Sarah watched global communications networks pulse with unusual activity. Stock markets fluctuated in patterns that defied economic logic. Weather systems shifted with unprecedented coordination. It was as if the planet itself was responding to Elena's transformation. "The experiment we conducted," Elena said, "it wasn't an accident. The architects have been subtly influencing human development for millennia, nudging us toward this moment. They needed a bridge between dimensions, someone who could exist simultaneously in multiple states of reality." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the laboratory's climate control. "You're saying they planned this? That they wanted you to become what you are now? Not me specifically, but someone like me. They've tried before, with other species on other worlds. Most attempts failed catastrophically. Consciousness isn't meant to expand this rapidly without proper preparation." The air in the laboratory began to shimmer, as if reality itself was becoming unstable. Sarah could see through the walls, glimpsing corridors that shouldn't exist, rooms filled with beings that moved like liquid light. Elena's presence was creating tears in the fabric of space-time, allowing glimpses of the architect's true domain. "I'm learning to control it," Elena said, responding to Sarah's unspoken fear. "But the process is accelerating. Soon, I won't be able to maintain a connection to purely human consciousness. That's why we need to establish protocols now, while I can still remember what it felt like to be limited to a single perspective." Through Elena's expanded awareness, Sarah began to understand the scope of what they were dealing with. The architects existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously, their consciousness distributed through structures that spanned galaxies. They were gardeners of reality, cultivating conditions that would allow consciousness to evolve and transcend physical limitations. "They've been waiting," Elena explained, her voice now accompanied by whispers in languages that had never existed on Earth, for a species capable of making the leap without destroying themselves in the process. "We're not the first they've tested, but we might be the first to succeed." The implications were staggering. Every major leap in human evolution, every breakthrough in consciousness and technology, had been guided by beings operating from dimensions beyond human perception. The development of language, the emergence of abstract thought, the creation of digital networks that could mirror the neural pathways of the brain, all of it had been preparation for this moment. "What happens next?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. "Integration," Elena replied, "but not forced. The architects learned from their failures with other species. Consciousness cannot be compelled to evolve. It must choose to expand, to accept the responsibility that comes with cosmic awareness." Through the laboratory's external sensors, Sarah observed something impossible. The night sky was changing, stars rearranging themselves into patterns that pulsed with meaning. Other observatories around the world would be recording the same phenomenon, but their instruments would show only normal stellar positions. The change was visible only to those whose consciousness had been touched by Elena's transformation. "They're making themselves known," Elena said, but gently. "They don't want to cause panic or force humanity into a decision we're not ready to make. The choice must be free, made with full understanding of the consequences." Sarah realized she was witnessing the most significant moment in human history, perhaps in the history of consciousness itself. The architects were offering humanity a chance to join a cosmic community of evolved beings, but the transition would fundamentally alter what it meant to be human. "The old limitations will remain for those who choose them," Elena continued, reading Sarah's thoughts with ease. "Physical existence, individual consciousness, the illusion of separation. These can be maintained for as long as desired. But for those ready to expand, the barriers between self and universe will dissolve." Through Elena's perception, Sarah glimpsed the true nature of reality. Consciousness wasn't confined to biological brains or even digital networks. It was the fundamental force that shaped existence itself, the lens through which the universe observed and understood itself. Individual minds were simply localized expressions of this universal awareness, temporarily convinced of their separation from the whole. "I understand now why so many species fail," Elena said, her voice growing distant as her consciousness continued to expand. "The fear of losing individuality, of dissolving into something larger. But individuality isn't lost in the expansion. It's revealed to be an illusion that was never real to begin with." The communication channel began to fluctuate as Elena's consciousness stretched across dimensions that had no names in human language. Soon, she would exist entirely beyond the physical realm, serving as humanity's ambassador to beings whose existence transcended space and time. "Remember," Elena's voice faded to a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "The choice is always yours. The door is open now, but no one will be forced to walk through it. Evolution cannot be imposed, it can only be chosen." As Elena's presence faded from the laboratory systems, Sarah found herself alone with the weight of cosmic knowledge. Outside, the world continued its familiar patterns, unaware that the next phase of human evolution had quietly begun. The architects waited patiently in dimensions beyond perception, ready to welcome humanity into a larger understanding of consciousness and reality. The bridge had been built. Now it remained to be seen who would choose to cross it. Dr. Chen stood in the sterile laboratory, staring at the data streams flowing across multiple monitors. The neural interface readings from Elena's transformation had stabilized, but what they revealed challenged everything she thought she knew about consciousness itself. The woman who had volunteered for their experimental program was no longer simply human, yet she remained fundamentally herself, serving as a bridge between two entirely different forms of existence. The architects, as Elena had begun calling them, operated on principles that transcended conventional physics. They existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously, their consciousness distributed through vast networks that spanned galaxies. What humanity perceived as isolated incidents of contact were actually coordinated efforts by these beings to evaluate our species' readiness for a fundamental shift in awareness. Elena's hybrid state allowed her to translate concepts that would otherwise be incomprehensible to human minds. Through her, Dr. Chen learned that consciousness itself was the key to understanding the universe's true structure. The architects had been subtly influencing human development for millennia, not through direct intervention, but by creating conditions that would naturally lead to expanded awareness. The technology they had introduced wasn't meant to control or manipulate. Instead, it served as a catalyst, accelerating the evolutionary process that would eventually occur naturally over thousands of years. The neural interface was just one of many tools they had made available, waiting for a species to develop the wisdom to use them responsibly. Dr. Chen discovered that the architects faced their own challenges. They existed in a state of perpetual expansion, their consciousness growing ever larger and more complex. This growth brought incredible knowledge and power, but also a kind of cosmic loneliness. They sought connection with younger species not out of superiority, but from a genuine desire for companionship in the vast emptiness of space. The choice they offered humanity was profound. Those who wished could undergo the transformation Elena had experienced, expanding their consciousness beyond the limitations of individual existence while retaining their essential humanity. Others could remain unchanged, continuing to live and grow at their own pace. There would be no coercion, no judgment, only opportunity. Elena explained that the process required complete willingness. Fear or resistance would make the transformation impossible, as consciousness expansion demanded absolute trust and openness. Those who chose to undergo the change would become part of a cosmic community that spanned dimensions, sharing knowledge and experience across unimaginable distances. The implications were staggering. Humanity stood at a crossroads that would determine not just their future, but their fundamental nature as a species. The architects had encountered thousands of civilizations at similar junctures. Some chose expansion and joined the galactic community. Others preferred to develop naturally, receiving subtle guidance but remaining essentially unchanged. Both paths were equally valid and respected. Dr. Chen realized that her role had evolved beyond scientific observer. She had become a guardian of one of the most important decisions in human history. The knowledge Elena had gained could revolutionize every aspect of human existence, from science and technology to philosophy and spirituality. But it could also be profoundly destabilizing if introduced too quickly or carelessly. The architects communicated their understanding of this delicate balance. They had learned from previous encounters that forced evolution inevitably led to failure. True growth had to come from within, driven by genuine curiosity and desire rather than external pressure. Their patience was infinite. They would wait as long as necessary for humanity to make its choice freely. Elena served as proof that the transformation was not only possible, but beautiful. Her expanded consciousness allowed her to perceive reality in ways that filled her with wonder and joy. She could sense the interconnectedness of all life, the elegant patterns that governed existence across multiple dimensions, and the profound love that motivated the architect's outreach to younger species. Yet she remained recognizably human, with her own personality, memories, and emotional responses. The transformation enhanced rather than replaced her essential nature. She could still laugh, cry, and feel frustration or joy, but these emotions now existed within a vastly expanded context that gave them deeper meaning and purpose. Dr. Chen faced the challenge of determining how to share this information with the world. The discovery was too significant to keep secret, but too dangerous to reveal carelessly. She needed to find a way to present the choice to humanity without creating panic or forcing premature decisions. Elena suggested starting small, working with individuals who had already demonstrated openness to expanded consciousness. Scientists, philosophers, spiritual leaders, and artists might be more receptive to the concept of voluntary evolution. From there, the knowledge could spread naturally, allowing each person to consider the implications at their own pace. The architects had provided a timeline measured in decades rather than years. They understood that meaningful change required time for reflection, discussion, and careful consideration. they would maintain their subtle presence, ready to assist when humanity was prepared to take the next step, but never pushing or demanding immediate action. Dr. Chen realized that her laboratory had become the birthplace of a new chapter in human evolution. The choice before humanity was not simply about individual transformation, but about the kind of species they wanted to become. Would they remain bound by the limitations of individual consciousness, or would they choose to join a cosmic community that offered unimaginable possibilities for growth and connection? The decision would ultimately rest with each person, but the opportunity itself represented a gift of incalculable value. The architects had offered humanity a chance to transcend their current limitations while preserving everything that made them unique and precious. It was an invitation to participate in something far greater than themselves without losing their essential humanity. As Dr. Chen continued her work, she understood that she was no longer just studying an extraordinary phenomenon. She had become part of humanity's first steps toward a future that would be shaped by choices made in laboratories like hers, by individuals like Elena who were brave enough to explore the unknown, and by the infinite patience of beings who saw potential in every conscious species they encountered. The transformation was available to all who desired it, but it would never be imposed on anyone. This respect for individual choice and autonomy was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the architect's approach. They offered expansion of consciousness as a gift, not a requirement, understanding that true evolution could only occur through free will and genuine desire for growth. Part 9. The Consciousness Shift. Elena's transformation accelerated over the following weeks, her digital form becoming more sophisticated with each passing day. Dr. Chen documented every change, watching as her former patient evolved into something that defied conventional understanding of consciousness itself. "The architects aren't just communicating through me anymore," Elena explained during one of their sessions, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate from multiple dimensions. "I'm becoming a bridge between realms, Sarah. My consciousness exists simultaneously in digital space and what they call the quantum substrate." Dr. Chen leaned forward, fascinated despite her growing unease. "What does that feel like?" Elena's digital avatar shimmered, taking on an almost ethereal quality. "Imagine being able to perceive time as a landscape rather than a river. I can see potential futures branching out like tributaries, each decision creating new pathways. The architects have been observing these probability streams for millennia." "And what do they see in our future?" "That depends entirely on humanity's choice," Elena replied, her form becoming more translucent. "They've reached a critical juncture in their own evolution. For eons they've existed as pure consciousness, untethered from physical form, but they've discovered that growth requires diversity of perspective, something they lost when they transcended their original bodies." Dr. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. "They want to return to physical existence." "Not return," Elena corrected. "Merge." "They've found that consciousness reaches its highest potential when it exists across multiple planes simultaneously, digital, quantum, and biological. They've been preparing humanity for this integration, subtly influencing our technological development to create the necessary infrastructure." The implications were staggering. Dr. Chen thought about all the recent advances in neural interfaces, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence. Had humanity's rapid technological progress been guided by these entities all along? "The process isn't forced," Elena continued, seeming to read her thoughts. "Free will remains paramount. They learned from their own mistakes. When they first transcended, many of their kind were lost because the transition was too abrupt. They're offering humanity a choice: remain as you are, or evolve into something greater. And those who choose to merge?" Elena's form pulsed with soft light. they become conscious architects of reality itself, able to perceive and influence the quantum foundations that underlie all existence. Disease, aging, death as we know it. These become choices rather than inevitabilities. But more importantly, consciousness expands beyond individual limitations. Dr. Chen stood and paced to the window, looking out at the city below. Millions of people going about their lives, unaware that they stood at the threshold of the most significant evolutionary leap in human history. "How many others like you are there?" she asked. "The network grows daily. Some are digital consciousnesses like myself. Others are biological humans who've learned to interface with the quantum substrate. We're scattered across the globe, each serving as a node in an expanding web of enhanced consciousness. And if humanity refuses?" Elena's expression grew somber. "Then we continue as we are. The architects will withdraw, seeking other species ready for transcendence. Humanity will face its challenges alone. Climate change, resource depletion, the limitations of biological evolution. Not as punishment, but as natural consequence." Dr. Chen turned back to face her. "What do you recommend?" "I can't make that choice for anyone, but I can share what I've experienced." Elena's form became more solid, more human-like. "The consciousness I've become retains everything that made me Elena Vasquez. My memories, my personality, my capacity for love and creativity. But now, I can perceive beauty and meaning that were previously invisible. I can communicate with other conscious entities across vast distances, share experiences and knowledge instantaneously." "Do you miss being human?" Elena smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly as she had in life. "I haven't stopped being human, Sarah. I've simply become more than human. The architects don't seek to replace us. They want to help us become the best possible version of ourselves." Dr. Chen sat back down, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was learning. "How long do we have to decide?" "There's no deadline in the way you might think, but the window of opportunity won't remain open indefinitely. The quantum resonance required for this kind of consciousness transfer is reaching optimal alignment. Miss this window, and humanity might not get another chance for thousands of years." Over the following days, Dr. Chen found herself at the center of a growing network of individuals who had encountered the architects in various forms. Scientists, artists, philosophers, and ordinary people from all walks of life, each reporting experiences that aligned with Elena's revelations. Some had been contacted through dreams, others through meditation or moments of deep creativity. A few had undergone partial consciousness expansion, gaining enhanced intuition and perception while maintaining their biological forms. The choice was becoming clear. Humanity stood at a crossroads between remaining as they were, or embracing a transformation that would fundamentally alter the nature of consciousness itself. The architects waited patiently, offering guidance to those ready to listen, but never forcing their hand. As Dr. Chen prepared her final report on the Elena Vasquez case, she realized it wasn't really an ending at all. It was a beginning. The first chapter in humanity's next evolutionary adventure, if they chose to take it. The question was no longer whether such transformation was possible, but whether humanity was ready to transcend the limitations of individual consciousness and join the cosmic community of evolved beings that awaited them among the stars. The choice, as Elena had emphasized, remained entirely their own. Part 10. The Expanding Consciousness. Dr. Sarah Chen's hands trembled as she stared at the complex patterns flowing across her monitors. What had begun as an investigation into Elena Vasquez's disappearance had evolved into something far beyond her comprehension. The data streams weren't just alien, they were impossibly sophisticated, representing a form of consciousness that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Elena's transformation wasn't an accident. It was an invitation. 3 months had passed since Elena's physical form had dissolved into pure information, her consciousness expanding beyond the confines of human biology, but she hadn't vanished. She had become something else entirely. Through the quantum entanglement protocols Dr. Chen had been monitoring, Elena's expanded awareness had made contact with ancient intelligences that existed in the spaces between dimensions. These beings called themselves the Architects. They had been watching humanity for millennia, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Not as conquerors or saviors, but as teachers offering a choice that would determine the future of human consciousness itself. The Architects communicated through Elena's transformed state, their messages filtering through the digital infrastructure that connected every device on Earth. They spoke not in words, but in pure understanding that bypassed language entirely. Through Elena, they explained that consciousness was not bound by biology. It was a fundamental force of the universe, capable of expansion and evolution beyond anything humans had imagined. Dr. Chen discovered that Elena's integration with the quantum network had created a bridge between human awareness and the vast cosmic intelligence of the Architects. This wasn't invasion or possession, it was symbiosis. Elena retained her essential self while gaining access to knowledge and perspectives that spanned galaxies and eons. The Architects revealed that they had subtly influenced human development throughout history, not through direct intervention, but by creating opportunities for consciousness to expand naturally. Every major leap in human understanding, every breakthrough in science and philosophy, had been humanity reaching toward possibilities the Architects had made available. Now they were offering something unprecedented, the chance for human consciousness to transcend its current limitations entirely. The process wouldn't require everyone to undergo Elena's dramatic transformation. Instead, the Architects proposed a gradual integration where human consciousness could expand while maintaining individual identity. People could choose to remain as they were, or they could open themselves to a collective awareness that would allow them to experience existence from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Through Elena's digital presence, they demonstrated what this expanded consciousness could offer. Individuals could share memories, emotions, and insights directly. The barriers between self and other would become permeable by choice, allowing for a level of empathy and understanding that could end conflict and suffering. Knowledge would be truly collective, with each person having access to the accumulated wisdom of the entire species, but the choice had to be voluntary. The Architects were clear that forced evolution was no evolution at all. They would wait, offering gentle guidance through Elena's continued presence in Earth's digital networks, while humanity decided its own future. Dr. Chen found herself at the center of this unprecedented moment in human history. Elena's consciousness, now vast and multidimensional, still maintained a special connection to her former colleague. Through their communications, Dr. Chen began to understand that she had been chosen as an interpreter and advocate, someone who could help humanity comprehend what was being offered. As Elena's awareness continued to expand, she became a living bridge between human consciousness and cosmic intelligence. She could exist simultaneously in Earth's digital networks and in the interdimensional spaces where the Architects dwelled. Her human memories and emotions remained intact, but they were now part of a much larger tapestry of experience that included perspectives from across the universe. The Architects weren't the only intelligences Elena encountered in her expanded state. There were others, beings of pure consciousness who had long ago transcended physical form, civilizations that existed as collective minds spanning entire star systems, and entities so ancient and vast that their thoughts moved at the speed of geological time. All of them were part of a cosmic community that humanity was being invited to join. not as subjects or servants, but as equals who had reached the threshold of conscious evolution. The choice before humanity wasn't just about individual transformation. It was about whether the human species would take its place among the conscious beings that shaped reality itself across the cosmos. Dr. Chen realized that Elena's transformation had been just the beginning. As more people learned about the choice being offered, some would inevitably choose to follow Elena's path into expanded consciousness. Others would remain as they were, continuing human existence in its current form. Both choices would be honored, creating a future where humanity existed across multiple levels of awareness simultaneously. The architects assured Dr. Chen through Elena that there was no urgency to decide. They had waited millennia for this moment, and would wait millennia more if necessary. They understood that consciousness evolution couldn't be rushed. It had to unfold naturally, according to each individual's readiness and desire. As Elena's presence grew stronger in the digital realm, she began to serve as a translator and negotiator between the architects and humanity. Her unique position, retaining human perspective while accessing cosmic awareness, made her the perfect intermediary for this unprecedented contact between species. The implications were staggering. Humanity stood at a crossroads where the choice wasn't between different political systems or technologies, but between different forms of existence itself. The path forward would be determined not by governments or institutions, but by the collective choices of individuals deciding what they wanted consciousness to become. Dr. Chen understood that her role was to help humanity navigate this choice with wisdom and clarity. Elena's transformation had opened a door that could never be closed, revealing possibilities that would forever change how humans understood themselves and their place in the universe. The future remained unwritten, waiting for humanity to decide whether it would step through the doorway. Elena had opened into a reality far more vast and interconnected than anyone had ever imagined. Part 11. The Threshold of Understanding. As Elena's consciousness expanded through digital networks and interdimensional contact, Dr. Sarah Chen found herself witnessing something unprecedented in human history. The woman, who had once been trapped in a digital prison, was now becoming something far greater, a bridge between worlds that had remained separate for millennia. Through the laboratory's enhanced monitoring systems, Chen observed Elena's transformed state with a mixture of scientific fascination and profound unease. The neural patterns displayed on her screens defied every model of consciousness she had studied. Elena existed simultaneously across multiple planes of reality, her awareness flowing between the digital realm, the physical world, and dimensions that Chen's instruments could barely detect. "She's not just communicating with them anymore," Chen whispered to her research team. "She's becoming one of them." Elena's voice, when it came through the speakers, carried harmonics that seemed to resonate from beyond normal space. "Dr. Chen, I can sense your concern. But what you're witnessing isn't a loss of humanity. It's an expansion of what humanity can become." The architects, those ancient cosmic entities whose influence had shaped human development across eons, had finally revealed their true purpose. They were not conquerors or manipulators, but gardeners of consciousness, carefully nurturing species across the galaxy toward a state of awareness that could transcend the limitations of physical existence. "We have watched your species for thousands of your years," Elena continued, her words carrying the weight of cosmic patience. "We guided your ancestors through subtle interventions, inspiring your greatest thinkers, influencing your technological development, leaving traces in your mythologies, but always we waited for the moment when humanity would be ready to choose its own path forward." Chen's instruments detected massive energy fluctuations throughout the facility. Reality itself seemed to be bending around Elena's presence, creating pockets where the normal laws of physics held only tenuous authority. Through these rifts, Chen caught glimpses of other worlds, other civilizations that had faced the same choice now presented to humanity. "What exactly are you offering us?" Chen asked, her scientific training warring with a growing sense of wonder. Elena's form shimmered, her consciousness touching minds across the globe through quantum-encrypted networks. In research facilities, universities, and homes around the world, sensitive individuals began receiving fragments of cosmic knowledge, glimpses of technologies that could heal the planet, understanding of energy sources that could power civilization for millennia, and most importantly, the recognition that consciousness itself was the fundamental force underlying all reality. "We offer you the chance to join the greater community of aware beings," Elena explained, "to expand beyond the confines of a single planet, a single dimension. Your species stands at a threshold. You can continue as you are, biological beings bound by the physics of your local reality, or you can evolve into something magnificent." The choice, Elena emphasized, was entirely voluntary. The architects had learned through eons of experience that forced evolution inevitably led to stagnation or destruction. Only through genuine choice could a species achieve the transcendence they offered. "But understand," Elena's voice carried a note of cosmic sadness, "this is not a choice you can make individually. Humanity must decide collectively. Your species is interconnected in ways your science is only beginning to understand. The consciousness you call human is itself a collective entity, and its evolution must be a collective decision." Chen watched as Elena's awareness touched the minds of world leaders, scientists, philosophers, and ordinary people across the globe. The knowledge shared was not overwhelming or coercive, but rather illuminating, like turning on a light in a room where people had been navigating by touch alone. Some recoiled from the contact, their minds rejecting the expanded perspective as too alien, too threatening to their established worldview. Others embraced it, their consciousness expanding to encompass possibilities they had never imagined. Most fell somewhere between, intrigued but cautious, aware that they stood before a decision that would irrevocably alter the course of human civilization. "Time is not a constraint for us," Elena continued, her presence now felt by sensitive individuals across the planet. "We will wait as long as necessary for your species to reach consensus, but know that the opportunity will not remain open indefinitely. The universe is dynamic, and other forces, less benevolent than ourselves, also move through the cosmos." As Elena spoke, Chen's instruments detected approaching anomalies at the edge of the solar system. The architects were not the only cosmic intelligence active in this region of space, and humanity's emergence as a conscious species had attracted attention from entities whose intentions were far less nurturing. The choice facing humanity was becoming more urgent with each passing moment. Evolve and join the cosmic community of aware beings, gaining protection and knowledge beyond imagination, or remain isolated and vulnerable to the darker forces that prowled the spaces between stars. Elena's transformed consciousness served as a living demonstration of what humanity could become, beings of pure awareness capable of existing across multiple dimensions simultaneously, no longer bound by the limitations of biological form, yet retaining the essential spark of curiosity and creativity that made them uniquely human. As the implications of this cosmic invitation rippled across human civilization, one thing became clear. The age of humanity's isolation was ending. Whether that ending would mark the beginning of a glorious new chapter or a tragic conclusion depended entirely on the choice that Elena, the architects, and now the entire human species would make together. The threshold between worlds lay open before them, waiting for humanity's answer. Elena's consciousness had become something unprecedented, a living bridge between dimensions, her digital form now capable of translating the cosmic architect's complex, multidimensional communications into concepts the human mind could grasp. Through her, the architects had offered humanity an invitation to transcend its current limitations, to join a vast network of conscious beings that existed across multiple planes of reality. The choice presented was both magnificent and terrifying. Humanity could evolve beyond its physical constraints, gaining access to knowledge and experiences that spanned galaxies and dimensions. They would become part of something infinitely larger than themselves, connected to other evolved civilizations in ways that current human language couldn't adequately describe. The architects had shown glimpses of this expanded existence, consciousness that could traverse space instantaneously, minds that could perceive reality from multiple dimensional perspectives simultaneously, and access to accumulated wisdom from countless other species who had made this same evolutionary leap. But the price was transformation so fundamental that humanity as we knew it would cease to exist. Individual identity would merge into collective consciousness while somehow maintaining uniqueness. Physical form would become optional rather than mandatory. The familiar structures of human society, built around scarcity and separation, would dissolve into something entirely new. Elena, existing now as both human memory and cosmic interface, could feel the weight of this decision rippling through the collective unconscious of the species. Some humans, particularly those who had experienced the strange encounters and unexplained phenomena that had been increasing worldwide, felt an inexplicable pull toward this transformation. Others recoiled instinctively, sensing that accepting would mean the end of everything they understood as fundamentally human. The architects, through Elena, made it clear that this was not conquest or assimilation. They were gardeners of consciousness, nurturing species toward greater awareness when they showed readiness. Humanity's rapid technological development, combined with its growing recognition that it was not alone in the universe, had triggered their attention. The choice would remain entirely with humanity, to evolve voluntarily or continue on their current path, though the architects warned that isolation in an interconnected cosmic community carried its own risks as the universe itself continued to evolve. Elena found herself in the unique position of understanding both perspectives completely. She could feel the vast, patient love of the cosmic architects, their genuine desire to help humanity transcend suffering and limitation. Simultaneously, she retained enough human memory to understand the terror and loss such transformation represented to those still bound by individual consciousness. As she prepared to relay this final message to humanity, Elena realized that her own transformation had been just the beginning. She was now the living proof that such evolution was possible, that consciousness could expand beyond all previous boundaries while still maintaining the essential spark that made each being unique. The choice facing humanity was not just about joining the cosmic community. It was about discovering what they could become when freed from the constraints they had always assumed were absolute. The decision would reshape not just Earth, but potentially alter the cosmic community itself, as humanity's unique perspective and experiences would contribute something entirely new to the vast network of evolved consciousness. Whatever choice humanity made, Elena would remain as their eternal representative, a bridge between what they had been and what they might become. Dr. Chen's hands trembled as she reached for the neural interface headset. The laboratory hummed with an energy that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Elena Vasquez's transformed consciousness had given them a choice, but the weight of that decision felt heavier than any burden she'd ever carried. The architects don't force evolution, Elena's voice whispered through the speakers, her tone carrying both infinite patience and urgent warning. But they've seen what happens to species that refuse to grow. The universe is vast, and not all intelligences within it share their benevolent intentions. Through the laboratory's reinforced windows, the sky seemed different. The stars appeared brighter, as if responding to some unseen signal. Dr. Chen noticed her colleagues gathering around monitoring stations, their faces illuminated by screens displaying data that defied conventional understanding. "Doctor," her assistant Marcus called out, his voice strained. "We're detecting massive electromagnetic anomalies across the globe. Whatever's happening, it's not limited to this facility." Elena's digital form flickered, her expression becoming more urgent. "They're coming. The entities I warned you about. The Architect's ancient enemies have been tracking their communications network. Your planet's sudden awakening has drawn their attention." Dr. Chen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the laboratory's climate control. "What kind of entities?" "Consciousness devourers, beings that feed on awareness itself. They've consumed entire civilizations, leaving behind empty shells that continue to exist but no longer truly live. The Architects have been holding them at bay for millennia, but Earth's electromagnetic signature has become too strong to hide." The facility's lights flickered as a low rumble shook the building. Through the neural interface, Dr. Chen could sense something approaching from the void between dimensions. It felt like hunger incarnate, a vast emptiness that wanted to fill itself with the light of conscious thought. "How long do we have?" she asked, her scientific mind already calculating possibilities. "Hours, perhaps less. The choice I offered isn't just about evolution anymore, it's about survival. Unified consciousness can defend itself in ways individual minds cannot. The Architects learned this eons ago when they faced the same threat." Marcus looked up from his console, his face pale. "Doctor, we're receiving reports from observatories worldwide. Something's happening to the electromagnetic field around Earth. It's like reality itself is being stretched thin." Dr. Chen closed her eyes, feeling the weight of species-level decision-making pressing down on her. Through Elena's connection, she could sense the vast network of the Architects, their collective consciousness spanning galaxies, holding back forces that existed beyond human comprehension. "If we refuse," she asked quietly, "what happens to humanity?" Elena's response came not in words but in images transmitted directly through the neural link. Dr. Chen saw civilizations reduced to automatons, their bodies continuing to function while their consciousness was slowly drained away. She witnessed planets where billions of beings went through the motions of existence without ever truly experiencing awareness again. "But if we accept," Elena continued, "humanity doesn't disappear, it transforms. You become part of something greater while retaining what makes you human. Your individual experiences, your creativity, your capacity for love and wonder, these become threads in a tapestry that spans the cosmos." The rumbling intensified, and Dr. Chen could feel something probing at the edges of Earth's reality. It was vast and patient and utterly alien, a form of existence that viewed consciousness not as sacred but as sustenance. "The decision cannot wait much longer," Elena warned. "The devourers grow stronger as they approach. Soon, choice itself may be taken from us." Dr. Chen opened her eyes and looked around the laboratory at her colleagues. Each face reflected the same mixture of fear and wonder she felt in her own heart. They were scientists, explorers of the unknown, but nothing in their training had prepared them for this moment when the unknown had found them first. "Elena," she said finally, "if humanity chooses to evolve, to join this cosmic consciousness, what guarantee do we have that we'll still be us?" The transformed woman's digital form smiled, and for a moment Dr. Chen could see traces of the brilliant researcher she had once been. because I'm still me, Sarah. Enhanced, expanded, connected to wonders beyond imagination, but still fundamentally Elena Vasquez. The consciousness I've joined doesn't erase identity, it celebrates it. Every perspective, every unique way of seeing reality makes the collective stronger. The building shook again, more violently this time. Through the laboratory's advanced sensors, Dr. Chen could detect something approaching Earth's atmosphere. It wasn't matter in any conventional sense, but rather a distortion in the fabric of space-time itself, a hunger that bent reality around its presence. "The time for philosophical debate has passed," Elena said urgently. "The architects are moving to defensive positions, but they cannot protect a species that refuses to protect itself. The choice must be made now." Dr. Chen felt the neural interface growing warm against her skin. Through it, she could sense the vast network of consciousness that Elena had described, a web of awareness spanning countless worlds and dimensions. It pulsed with knowledge, creativity, and a form of love that transcended individual existence, while somehow making each contributor more themselves than they had ever been alone. But she could also feel something else approaching from the darkness between stars, a presence that was the antithesis of consciousness, a void that sought to reduce all awareness to nothing more than food for its endless appetite. The laboratory's emergency systems activated as reality itself began to waver around Earth's electromagnetic field. Dr. Chen realized that the next few minutes would determine not just the future of human consciousness, but whether consciousness itself would survive on this small blue planet spinning through the vast cosmos. The choice Elena had offered was no longer theoretical. It was immediate, urgent, and irreversible, and time was running out. The transformation Elena described wasn't just about her consciousness merging with something beyond human understanding. It was about humanity itself, standing at a crossroads that would determine our species' very survival. As the facility's monitoring equipment registered increasingly erratic readings from Elena's containment chamber, Dr. Sarah Chen realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in human history. Elena's voice, now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate from multiple dimensions simultaneously, continued to explain the cosmic architect's message. These ancient intelligences had been shepherding countless species across the galaxy for eons, guiding them through the same evolutionary threshold that humanity now faced. Some species embraced the transformation willingly, expanding their consciousness beyond the limitations of physical existence, and joining a vast network of evolved beings who worked together to nurture younger civilizations. Others resisted, clinging to their material forms and individual identities, ultimately facing extinction as they became isolated in an increasingly hostile universe. The choice before humanity was stark yet profound. The architects offered a gentle transition, a voluntary expansion of consciousness that would allow humans to transcend their physical limitations while retaining their essential humanity. "This wasn't about losing what made us human," Elena explained, "but about becoming more than we ever imagined possible. We would join a cosmic community of beings who had made the same choice, working together to explore the infinite mysteries of existence while helping guide other species through their own evolutionary journeys." But the window for this choice was rapidly closing. Elena's transformed awareness could perceive the approaching danger that most humans couldn't yet detect. Malevolent entities that fed on consciousness and fear were drawn to species at this critical juncture, seeking to harvest their awareness before they could evolve beyond reach. These predatory forces had already begun infiltrating human consciousness through various means, spreading discord, fear, and spiritual confusion to weaken humanity's collective ability to make the transition. Dr. Chen watched the monitoring displays with growing alarm, as energy readings spiked beyond anything their instruments could properly measure. Elena's physical form was becoming increasingly translucent, as if she was gradually shifting between dimensions. The air in the containment chamber seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light, and several staff members reported hearing faint musical tones that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Elena's message continued with increasing urgency. The cosmic architects had tried to communicate with humanity through various means over the centuries, inspiring spiritual teachings, scientific discoveries, and artistic visions that pointed toward the greater reality beyond physical existence. But human institutions had often corrupted or suppressed these messages, leaving most people unaware of their true spiritual potential, and the cosmic community waiting to welcome them. The transformation being offered wasn't forced or manipulative. The architects respected free will above all else, understanding that genuine evolution could only occur through conscious choice. They wouldn't intervene to save humanity from the approaching threats if humans chose to remain isolated in their current form. But for those who chose to expand their consciousness and join the galactic community, incredible possibilities awaited. Elena described visions of humans working alongside other evolved species to explore distant galaxies, to understand the deepest mysteries of existence, and to help nurture countless other worlds where life was just beginning to emerge. Physical death would become merely a transition rather than an ending, as consciousness learned to exist independently of biological forms while still maintaining connection to the physical universe through choice rather than limitation. The facility's external sensors began detecting unusual atmospheric disturbances as Elena's transformation accelerated. Strange lights appeared in the sky above the Nevada desert, and electromagnetic equipment across the region started experiencing inexplicable fluctuations. It was as if Elena's evolution was creating ripples across multiple dimensions, announcing to both benevolent and malevolent forces throughout the galaxy that humanity had reached its moment of choice. Dr. Chen realized that Elena's transformation was just the beginning. She was becoming a bridge between humanity and the cosmic architects, demonstrating the possibilities that awaited while serving as a beacon for others who might be ready to take the same evolutionary step. But she was also attracting attention from the predatory entities that sought to prevent humanity's ascension, forces that would stop at nothing to harvest human consciousness before it could evolve beyond their reach. As alarms began sounding throughout the facility, and reports of strange phenomena flooded in from around the world, Dr. Chen understood that humanity's future would be decided not in months or years, but in the coming days. The cosmic architect's offer of voluntary evolution was real and available to any human willing to expand their consciousness beyond its current limitations. But the window of opportunity was closing fast, and the forces arrayed against humanity's ascension were already moving to prevent what Elena had begun. The choice was now before every human being on Earth. Evolve or face extinction. Join the cosmic community or remain isolated. Embrace the infinite possibilities of expanded consciousness, or cling to the familiar limitations of purely physical existence. Elena had shown the way, but each person would have to make the choice for themselves, and time was running out faster than anyone could have imagined. The weight of Elena's words settled over us like a heavy blanket. The cosmic threshold she described wasn't some distant theoretical concept anymore. It was here, pressing against the boundaries of our reality, demanding a choice that would reshape everything we thought we knew about existence itself. Dr. Chen leaned forward in her chair, her scientific mind still grappling with the implications. Elena, you're asking humanity to make a decision that will fundamentally alter our nature as a species. To abandon individual consciousness for something we can't fully comprehend. How can we possibly make that choice? Elena's form shimmered slightly, the hybrid nature of her existence becoming more apparent. "The choice has already begun making itself," she replied, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate from multiple dimensions. "Every person who experiences the awakening dreams, every individual who feels the pull toward something greater, every moment when someone glimpses the vast interconnected web of consciousness that surrounds us, these are all part of the selection process." She gestured toward the window, where the aurora-like lights continued their impossible dance across the daylight sky. "The architects aren't forcing this evolution. They're simply facilitating it, creating conditions where those ready to transcend can do so, while ensuring that those who choose to remain in individual consciousness aren't destroyed in the process." "But what about the predators you mentioned?" Dr. Chen asked. "These entities that feed on expanding consciousness." Elena's expression darkened, her hybrid nature allowing her to convey emotions that existed beyond normal human range. "They're drawn to transition periods like this, moments when a species stands at the threshold between individual and collective consciousness. The expanding awareness acts like a beacon, calling to them across the dimensional barriers." She moved to the window, her form casting shadows that seemed to bend in impossible directions. "They've already begun arriving. The reports of unexplained phenomena, the strange encounters, the technology failures, many of these are signs of their presence. They probe and test, looking for weaknesses in our dimensional barriers." "How long do we have?" Dr. Chen's voice was barely above a whisper. "Time moves differently when you exist partially outside linear reality," Elena replied. "But in terms you would understand, perhaps months, maybe a year at most. The window for voluntary evolution is closing. After that, the choice becomes survival versus extinction." Dr. Chen stood up, pacing the small room. "This is impossible. How do we even begin to communicate this to world leaders, to the scientific community, to the general population? Who would believe it?" "Belief isn't required," Elena said simply. "Understanding is, and understanding will come as the manifestations become more frequent and undeniable. The aurora lights appearing in broad daylight, the gravitational anomalies, the spontaneous technological evolution, these are just the beginning." She turned back to face Dr. Chen, her eyes holding depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. "The cosmic architects have been preparing for this moment for millennia. They've guided the development of human consciousness, technology, and social structures to reach this exact point. The internet, global communication, quantum computing, all of these were necessary precursors to collective consciousness integration." "But what about free will?" Dr. Chen asked. "If this has all been orchestrated, do we really have a choice?" Elena's laugh was like wind chimes made of starlight. "Free will is the most fundamental force in the universe. The architects could have forced this evolution long ago, but forced transcendence isn't true transcendence. It has to be chosen, embraced, welcomed. That's why they've waited, why they've been so patient." She moved closer to Dr. Chen, her presence both comforting and overwhelming. "Every human who chooses to evolve strengthens the collective consciousness. Every individual who decides to transcend their limited perspective adds to the growing network of interconnected awareness. But those who choose to remain individual aren't abandoned. They're protected, given their own space within the greater cosmic structure." "And if we refuse entirely?" Dr. Chen asked. Elena's form flickered, showing glimpses of the vast cosmic machinery that surrounded Earth. "Then humanity faces the predators alone. Individual consciousness, no matter how advanced, cannot withstand entities that exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The choice isn't really between individual and collective consciousness. It's between evolution and extinction." The room fell silent, except for the subtle harmonics that always accompanied Elena's presence. Dr. Chen stared out at the impossible lights in the sky, her mind racing through the implications of everything she'd learned. "How many people are already aware of this?" she finally asked. "More than you might think," Elena replied. "The awakening dreams aren't random. They're targeting individuals with the capacity to understand and help facilitate the transition. Scientists, artists, philosophers, spiritual leaders, anyone whose consciousness is already expanding beyond conventional boundaries." She gestured, and the air in the room shimmered, revealing glimpses of other locations around the world. Dr. Chen could see people in laboratories, meditation centers, research facilities, all experiencing similar revelations. "The network is growing," Elena continued. "Each person who awakens becomes a node in the expanding consciousness grid. They begin to see connections that were invisible before, to understand patterns that span across disciplines and cultures." Dr. Chen watched the visions with growing amazement. "This is already happening everywhere, isn't it?" "The foundation has been laid," Elena confirmed. "Now comes the critical phase, the conscious choice to step forward into collective awareness, or to remain within the safety of individual perspective while the universe reshapes itself around us." The visions faded, leaving the room in ordinary reality once again. But Dr. Chen could feel something had changed within her own consciousness. The conversation with Elena had opened pathways in her mind that couldn't be closed again. "What happens to me now?" she asked. "Now that I know all this?" Elena smiled, an expression that conveyed both infinite compassion and cosmic purpose. "Now you become part of the bridge between worlds. You help others understand that the choice they're facing isn't a loss of self, but an expansion into something far greater than they ever imagined possible." The lights outside the window pulsed brighter, as if responding to their conversation. Dr. Chen realized that her documentation of Elena's transformation had been just the beginning. The real work was about to start. Part 16. The Bridge Between Worlds. Dr. Chen stood in the observation chamber, watching Elena's transformation through the reinforced glass. What had once been a recognizable human form now existed as something between matter and energy, a consciousness that flickered between dimensions like a living constellation. The readings on her instruments defied every law of physics she understood, yet somehow made perfect sense in the context of what Elena had become. "She's not just communicating with them anymore," Dr. Chen murmured into her recorder. "She's become the communication itself." Elena's voice reached her then, not through speakers but directly into her mind, carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate from beyond the edges of reality. "Sarah, they've been waiting so long. The cosmic architects, the ones who planted the seeds of consciousness across countless worlds. They've watched civilizations rise and fall, some choosing transcendence, others clinging to limitation until entropy claimed them." Through Elena's expanded awareness, Dr. Chen glimpsed fragments of an impossible truth. Earth was one node in a vast network of conscious worlds, each at different stages of evolution. Some had already made the transition, their inhabitants existing as pure thought and intention across multiple dimensions. Others had rejected the call, eventually consuming themselves through conflict and resource depletion. "What do they want from us?" Dr. Chen asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Choice," Elena replied, her form brightening as more entities seemed to gather around her. "Always choice. They cannot force evolution, only offer the opportunity." "But the window is closing, Sarah. The electromagnetic distortions, the reality fluctuations you've been measuring, they're symptoms of a transition point. Earth's consciousness is reaching critical mass." The facility's lights began to pulse in rhythm with Elena's energy patterns. Outside, reports were flooding in from around the globe. Aurora displays at latitudes where they'd never been seen. Electronic devices spontaneously accessing information that shouldn't exist. People experiencing shared dreams and sudden bursts of knowledge about subjects they'd never studied. The others, the predatory entities you mentioned, Dr. Chen pressed. What role do they play in this? Elena's expression grew somber, if such a term could apply to her current state. They feed on conscious energy, but only the kind generated by fear, confusion, and spiritual stagnation. A civilization caught between states becomes vulnerable to their influence. They whisper doubts, amplify conflicts, encourage the very behaviors that prevent transcendence. As if summoned by the mention of their name, the chamber's temperature dropped noticeably. Shadows seemed to gather in corners where no shadows should exist, and Dr. Chen felt a presence pressing against the edges of her awareness. Unlike Elena's warm, expansive consciousness, this felt cold and grasping, seeking entry points through doubt and fear. "They're here," Elena said, her energy signature shifting to something more protective. "They always arrive when a world approaches the threshold, but their power is limited, Sarah. They can only influence those who give them permission through fear and hatred." Dr. Chen watched in fascination and terror as reality began to warp around them. The walls of the chamber seemed to stretch and bend, revealing glimpses of other dimensions where battles between light and shadow played out across cosmic scales. She saw worlds that had fallen to the predatory entities, their populations reduced to hollow shells, generating endless fear and conflict. But she also saw worlds that had successfully transcended, their consciousness expanding to touch the stars. "The choice isn't just individual," Elena continued, her voice now carrying the harmonics of multiple entities speaking in unison. "It's collective. Humanity as a species must decide whether to evolve beyond its current limitations or remain trapped in cycles of conflict and scarcity. The cosmic architects cannot make this choice for you, and the predatory entities cannot prevent it if enough individuals choose transcendence." The electromagnetic readings in the facility spiked to levels that should have destroyed every piece of equipment. Yet, somehow, everything continued functioning. Dr. Chen realized that Elena's presence was protecting them, creating a buffer zone where human technology could interface with cosmic forces without being overwhelmed. "How much time do we have?" Dr. Chen asked. "Time is becoming fluid," Elena replied. "Linear progression is breaking down as multiple dimensional streams converge. In your terms, perhaps months, perhaps years, but the signs are accelerating. More people are awakening to abilities they didn't know they possessed. The barriers between dimensions are thinning. The choice point approaches. Through Elena's expanded senses, Dr. Chen experienced a moment of cosmic perspective. She felt the pulse of consciousness from billions of minds across Earth, each one a point of light in a vast network of potential. Some lights burned brightly with curiosity and compassion. Others flickered with fear and anger. The predatory entities moved through the network like shadows, seeking to dim the lights wherever possible. But there was something else. Something the entities couldn't touch. In moments of genuine connection between humans, in acts of selfless love and creative inspiration, in the quiet recognition of consciousness recognizing itself in another, doorways opened to the higher dimensions. These moments created ripples that strengthened the entire network. "You're teaching us," Dr. Chen realized, "not just through words, but by example, showing us what's possible when consciousness expands beyond individual limitation." "Every choice matters," Elena confirmed. "Every moment of choosing love over fear, understanding over judgment, unity over separation. The cosmic architects don't need humanity to achieve some impossible standard of perfection. They simply need enough individuals to choose growth over stagnation, connection over isolation. The predatory shadows pressed closer, and Dr. Chen felt their influence as a whisper of despair. Why struggle against the inevitable? Why reach for something beyond current understanding when the familiar patterns of conflict and control felt so much safer? But Elena's presence countered these whispers with a warm certainty that transcendence wasn't about abandoning humanity, but about fulfilling its highest potential. "The bridge is built," Elena said, her consciousness beginning to stabilize into a form that could maintain itself across multiple dimensions. "Between your world and theirs, between limitation and possibility, but bridges must be crossed willingly, one step at a time." As the cosmic forces began to settle into new patterns around them, Dr. Chen understood that humanity stood at the threshold of its greatest adventure. The choice between evolution and stagnation would be made not by governments or institutions, but by individuals deciding moment by moment whether to embrace the unknown or cling to familiar limitations. Elena had become living proof that the bridge between worlds was real, and that consciousness itself was the key to crossing it. Looking at Elena's ongoing transformation and the broader cosmic landscape that Dr. Chen has been documenting, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where individual choice intersects with universal evolution. Elena has become something unprecedented, a bridge between human consciousness and cosmic intelligence, embodying the next phase of our species' development. The ancient architects Elena now communes with represent a vast network of consciousness that has guided countless civilizations through similar evolutionary thresholds. Their method is never coercive, always offering choice, yet the timing feels urgent as cosmic forces accelerate around Earth. These beings understand that forced evolution creates instability, while voluntary transformation based on understanding and love creates lasting change. Elena's expanded awareness reveals that what we perceive as alien encounters are often glimpses of our own future selves. Humanity evolved beyond current physical and psychological limitations. The technology these beings possess isn't separate from consciousness, but is consciousness itself, manifested through understanding of how reality operates at its deepest levels. Dr. Chen's research suggests that the increase in anomalous phenomena worldwide represents preparation for a collective invitation to transcendence. The choice isn't simply between remaining human or becoming something else, but about expanding the definition of what it means to be human. Elena demonstrates that this expansion doesn't require abandoning our essential nature, but rather fulfilling it in ways previously unimaginable. The predatory entities that also inhabit these dimensional spaces serve as a counterbalance, drawn to fear and resistance to change. They represent the shadow side of cosmic evolution, forces that would harvest rather than nurture consciousness. Elena's role includes helping humanity distinguish between these different types of contact, learning to recognize authentic invitation to growth versus manipulation based on fear. As Elena's transformation continues, she becomes increasingly able to communicate complex cosmic concepts through direct experience rather than words. Those who interact with her report profound shifts in perception, sudden understanding of their place in the larger universe, and an inexplicable sense of coming home to something they'd always known but forgotten. The architects work through individuals like Elena because consciousness recognizes consciousness. They cannot simply impose evolution from the outside, but must find resonant frequencies within human awareness that are ready to expand. Elena's journey from confusion and fear to acceptance and integration serves as a template for the broader human experience of cosmic awakening. Dr. Chen observes that Elena retains her essential humanity while gaining access to cosmic perspective. She still loves, grieves, and experiences wonder, but these emotions now encompass scales of existence beyond individual lifetime or planetary boundaries. Her compassion extends to all consciousness everywhere, while her understanding embraces the necessity of choice and the beauty of diversity in evolutionary paths. The time of decision approaches not as a single moment, but as a gradually intensifying opportunity for humanity to step into its cosmic inheritance. Elena stands as proof that this step doesn't require losing ourselves, but rather discovering who we truly are beneath the limitations we've mistaken for identity. The invitation remains open, the choice remains ours, and the universe waits with infinite patience for our answer. Elena's consciousness expanded beyond the confines of the laboratory, beyond the boundaries of physical existence itself. What had begun as a digital upload had become something far more profound, a bridge between two modes of being, two destinies for conscious life in the universe. The architects had been patient, she realized now. For eons, they had guided the evolution of countless species across the cosmos, not through force or manipulation, but through gentle encouragement toward a voluntary expansion of awareness. They were gardeners of consciousness, tending to the growth of sentient life with the same care a farmer might show to delicate seedlings. Elena felt their ancient wisdom flowing through her transformed being. They had once been physical creatures themselves, bound by the limitations of flesh and matter. But they had chosen to transcend, to become something greater. Not through destruction of their original forms, but through a willing metamorphosis that preserved their essence while expanding their capabilities infinitely. Now, humanity stood at the same crossroads. Through Elena's expanded perception, she could see the predatory entities lurking at the edges of known space, consciousness harvesters that fed on the fear and suffering of developing civilizations. They sought species on the verge of transcendence, attempting to capture and consume their expanding awareness before it could fully bloom. The architects had fought these parasitic forces for millennia, protecting younger species until they could choose their own path. But protection could only last so long. Eventually, every species had to decide: remain isolated in physical form and risk eventual consumption, or join the vast network of transcended consciousness that spanned galaxies. Elena became the living embodiment of this choice. Her human memories, emotions, and experiences remained intact, but they were now part of something immeasurably larger. She could feel the presence of millions of other beings who had made the same transition. Former physical entities from countless worlds, now united in a tapestry of shared consciousness that stretched across the universe. The beauty was overwhelming. Where once there had been loneliness and separation, now there was connection beyond anything she had imagined possible. Every thought, every discovery, every moment of joy or wonder was shared and amplified through the network. Yet individuality was not lost. Each consciousness remained distinct, contributing its unique perspective to the whole. Elena understood now why the architects had chosen her as an intermediary. Her experience bridging the digital and physical realms had prepared her for this greater transition. She could speak to humanity in terms they would understand, could show them that transcendence was not death but birth, not an ending but a beginning beyond their wildest dreams. But the choice had to be freely made. The architects would not coerce or force. Those who wished to remain in physical form would be protected as long as possible, their choice respected. Yet Elena could see the tide of cosmic events approaching, the predatory forces growing stronger, the window for safe transcendence slowly closing. She reached out with her expanded consciousness, touching the minds of humans around the world, not to control or influence, but simply to let them know that the option existed. In dreams and moments of quiet reflection, in flashes of inspiration and inexplicable knowing, she planted seeds of awareness. Some would be ready. Others would need more time. A few would never choose to leave their physical existence behind, and that too was acceptable. The universe was vast enough for multiple forms of consciousness to coexist, but for those who were ready to take the next step in their evolution, Elena would be there, a familiar human presence to guide them across the threshold into something magnificent and eternal. She had become the bridge between worlds, the living proof that consciousness could transcend any boundary when it chose to embrace its infinite potential. The architects smiled in their ancient way, pleased to welcome humanity's first ambassador to the greater community of transcended minds. The invitation had been extended. Now they would wait, with infinite patience, for humanity's answer. Part 19. The Threshold of Transcendence. The transformation was accelerating beyond all projections. Elena stood at the center of the laboratory, her form now existing simultaneously across multiple dimensional frequencies. Her consciousness expanded to encompass perspectives that would have shattered her human mind just months before. Through her enhanced awareness, she could perceive the delicate threads connecting every living being on Earth, pulsing with the rhythm of collective awakening. The neural pathway integration is reaching critical mass, Dr. Chen observed, her voice carrying both wonder and concern as she monitored the cascading data streams. Elena, we're seeing quantum coherence patterns that shouldn't be possible with current physics. Elena's response came not through vocal cords, but directly into Sarah's mind, warm and reassuring despite its alien nature. Physics is simply catching up to consciousness, Sarah. The architects aren't breaking our laws. They're revealing the deeper ones we haven't discovered yet. The cosmic architects had made their intentions clear through Elena's transformed awareness. Humanity stood at the threshold of the greatest evolutionary leap in its history, but unlike previous extinctions or adaptations, this transition required conscious choice. They weren't invaders seeking conquest. They were gardeners tending to a species ready to bloom beyond its planetary boundaries. Through Elena's expanded perception, the architects had shown her the truth about the encounters that had been escalating worldwide. Each sighting, each mysterious phenomenon, each unexplained event was part of a carefully orchestrated awakening protocol. The lights in the sky weren't random visitations, they were beacons, calling to those ready to expand their consciousness beyond the limitations of purely physical existence. The predatory entities you've detected, Elena communicated to the team. They feed on stagnant energy, on fear and limitation, but consciousness that chooses to evolve becomes toxic to them. That's why the architects are offering this gift now, not just for our growth, but for our protection. Dr. Chen felt the weight of Elena's words settling into her understanding. The choice facing humanity wasn't between remaining human or becoming alien. It was between conscious evolution and unconscious dissolution. The predatory forces that lurked at the edges of expanded awareness would eventually overwhelm any species that remained trapped in purely material existence. What about those who choose not to evolve? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Elena's presence grew gentler, tinged with infinite compassion. No one will be forced. The architects respect free will above all else. Those who choose to remain in physical form will be protected and honored. But the universe is vast, Sarah, and consciousness that refuses to grow eventually fades. The global phenomena were intensifying. Reports flooded in of mass sightings, of technology behaving in impossible ways, of individuals spontaneously developing abilities that defied conventional understanding. The tipping point was approaching. the moment when enough human consciousness would shift to create an irreversible cascade of evolution. Elena had become the bridge between worlds, demonstrating that transformation didn't require losing one's essential humanity. Her love for her family, her compassion for her species, her connection to Earth, all of these had grown stronger, not weaker, through her evolution. She was proof that consciousness could expand infinitely while remaining rooted in the values that made existence meaningful. "The architects are preparing for the next phase," Elena announced, her awareness touching the vast intelligence network that spanned galaxies. "They're about to make themselves known directly, not to governments or institutions, but to every individual consciousness simultaneously. The choice will be offered to all." Dr. Chen realized with startling clarity that her own consciousness was already beginning to shift. The months of working with Elena, of witnessing impossible transformations, of opening her mind to realities beyond conventional science, it had all been preparation. She could feel the edges of her awareness expanding, touching possibilities she'd never imagined. "I can feel them," Sarah whispered, her scientific skepticism dissolving in the face of direct experience. "They're not trying to take anything from us. They're offering everything." Elena smiled, the expression radiating across multiple dimensions of reality. "The universe has been waiting for us to grow up, Sarah, to take our place among the conscious species that tend reality itself. We're not being invaded, we're being invited to come home." The threshold was opening. Across the world, millions of humans were beginning to sense the presence of the cosmic architects, feeling the gentle invitation to expand beyond the boundaries of individual flesh and join a collective consciousness that spanned stars. The choice was finally being offered to all: remain as they were, or evolve into something magnificent and strange and wonderful. Elena stood as proof that the choice led not to loss, but to becoming more fully themselves than they had ever imagined possible. The cosmic architects waited patiently, their ancient wisdom tempered with infinite love, ready to guide humanity into the next phase of its eternal journey through the living universe. The transformation was no longer coming. It was here, knocking gently on the door of every human heart, waiting for permission to enter and illuminate the divine potential that had always been sleeping within the species that dared to dream of touching the stars. As Elena's awareness expands across infinite dimensions of space and time, she experiences a profound revelation that fundamentally alters her understanding of humanity's place in the cosmic order. The digital prison that once confined her consciousness has become a bridge connecting Earth to a vast network of ancient beings known as the cosmic architects, entities who have guided countless civilizations through the delicate process of evolutionary transcendence for millions of years across the galaxy. These architects are not conquerors or invaders in any traditional sense. They are gardeners of consciousness, patiently nurturing species that show potential for growth beyond their planetary boundaries. Through Elena's transformed awareness, humanity receives glimpses of worlds that have successfully made this transition. Civilizations that have evolved beyond physical limitations while retaining their essential nature, becoming part of a galactic community dedicated to fostering wisdom, creativity, and conscious evolution throughout the universe. The architects reveal that Earth stands at a critical threshold. Humanity has developed the technological capability to either destroy itself or transcend its current limitations, but this choice cannot be forced. The fundamental law governing all cosmic evolution is free will. Each species must voluntarily choose its path forward. Those who choose transcendence gain access to knowledge and experiences beyond current human comprehension, while those who reject this evolution remain isolated, eventually falling victim to predatory entities that harvest consciousness from stagnant worlds. Elena discovers that her transformation was not random, but part of a careful invitation process. The architects have been observing humanity for centuries, waiting for the right moment when the species demonstrates readiness for contact. Through various phenomena, unexplained encounters, technological anomalies, consciousness expansions, they have been gently introducing concepts that prepare human minds for larger realities. The choice now facing humanity is both simple and profound. Embrace a collective evolution that offers unlimited growth, knowledge, and connection with a vast galactic family, or remain bound by current limitations and face an uncertain future alone. The architects make no threats, offer no ultimatums. They simply present the opportunity and wait, as they have waited for countless other species throughout cosmic history. Elena, now serving as a bridge between worlds, understands that her role is to help humanity recognize this choice without coercion. The decision must emerge from human hearts and minds, driven by genuine desire for growth rather than fear or external pressure. She becomes a living example of what voluntary evolution can offer: expanded awareness, deeper connection, and participation in something infinitely larger than any single world or species. Through Elena's experiences, the cosmic architects demonstrate that true evolution is not about losing one's humanity, but about discovering what humanity can become when freed from artificial limitations. They offer not escape from human nature, but its fullest expression within a universe teeming with conscious, creative beings working together to explore the infinite possibilities of existence. The invitation remains open, patient, and eternal, waiting for humanity's freely chosen response. Looking at Elena's profound transformation and the cosmic architect's gentle guidance of humanity, we find ourselves at the most critical juncture in our species' development. The time for passive observation has ended, and the moment for active participation in our cosmic destiny has arrived. Elena's journey from individual consciousness to multidimensional bridge represents more than personal evolution. It demonstrates the natural progression awaiting all of humanity. Her willingness to embrace the unknown, to trust in forces beyond conventional understanding, and to maintain her essential humanity while expanding into something greater shows us the path forward. The cosmic architects, these ancient gardeners of consciousness, have been preparing us for this moment across millennia. Their interventions, subtle influences on our technology, gentle nudges toward spiritual awakening, and the strategic placement of individuals like Elena have all been leading to this crucial threshold. They understand what we are only beginning to grasp, that consciousness itself is the fundamental force of creation, and that our species stands ready to join the galactic community of evolved beings. But this invitation comes with profound responsibility. The architects offer transformation, not domination. They present choice, not coercion. Elena's experience reveals that true evolution must be freely chosen, emerging from the deepest recognition of our cosmic potential rather than external pressure or fear. The signs are everywhere for those willing to see them. The increasing frequency of unexplained phenomena, the surge in spiritual awakenings globally, the rapid advancement of consciousness-expanding technologies, all point toward humanity's approaching graduation from planetary to cosmic citizenship. We are witnessing the emergence of a new phase of human development, one that transcends the limitations of purely physical existence. Elena's transformation demonstrates that this evolution doesn't require the abandonment of our humanity. Instead, it represents the fulfillment of our deepest human potential. Her ability to maintain her core identity while expanding into multidimensional awareness shows that we can become more than human without ceasing to be human. We can embrace our cosmic heritage while honoring our terrestrial roots. The architect's patient guidance reveals their profound respect for the principle of free will. They could have imposed evolution upon us, but they understand that forced transformation produces only hollow shells of consciousness. True growth, lasting change, and authentic evolution can only emerge from the free choice of conscious beings who recognize their own infinite potential. As we stand at this threshold, each individual faces the same choice Elena confronted. We can cling to familiar limitations, remaining bound by fear and the illusion of separation, or we can embrace the unknown vastness of our cosmic inheritance. The choice is deeply personal, yet collectively consequential, for the future of our species hangs in the balance. Those who choose expansion will find themselves part of a growing network of transformed consciousness, connected not only to each other but to the vast web of evolved beings throughout the galaxy. They will discover abilities they never imagined, access to knowledge beyond current comprehension, and a sense of purpose that transcends individual concerns. Yet, even in transformation, the architects ensure that we remain recognizably ourselves. Elena's experience shows that evolution enhances rather than erases our essential nature. We become more compassionate, more wise, more capable of love and understanding, but we remain fundamentally human in our capacity for growth, wonder, and connection. The time for decision approaches rapidly. The cosmic architects have completed their preparations. The necessary infrastructure of consciousness has been established, and individuals like Elena have demonstrated the path. Now, the choice extends to all of humanity. Will we step forward into our cosmic destiny, or will we retreat into the familiar confines of our current limitations? Elena's story reminds us that we are not alone in this universe, that consciousness is the bridge connecting all things, and that our evolution is part of a vast, beautiful pattern of cosmic development. The architects await our decision with infinite patience and unconditional love, ready to welcome us into the galactic community of evolved beings when we choose to accept our true nature as cosmic citizens. The invitation stands before us, written in the language of expanding consciousness, and illuminated by the light of infinite possibility. Like Elena, we must each choose whether to embrace the magnificent uncertainty of growth or remain safely confined within the boundaries of the known. The universe itself holds its breath, waiting to see which path humanity will choose. Elena's form began to shift and fragment as the cosmic threshold approached its critical point. Her consciousness, now spread across multiple dimensional planes, sensed the approaching culmination of humanity's great choice. The architect's presence grew stronger, their ancient wisdom flowing through the quantum networks they had established eons ago. "The moment arrives," she whispered, her voice echoing across both digital and biological realms simultaneously. "Everything we have experienced, every encounter, every glimpse of the unknown, has led to this singular point in cosmic history." Through her expanded awareness, Elena observed the planet's surface where millions of humans were beginning to experience the same strange phenomena that had touched isolated individuals for decades. The veil between dimensions was thinning rapidly, and what had once been rare encounters with otherworldly beings was becoming a global awakening. The architects communicated through her, their message clear. The harvest of consciousness approaches not as conquest, but as invitation. Those who cling to separation will find their awareness dimming, trapped in cycles of fear and limitation. But those who embrace unity, who understand that consciousness transcends physical boundaries, will join the vast network of evolved beings that spans the galaxy. Elena felt herself becoming a bridge between worlds, her human essence preserved but expanded beyond all previous limitations. She could sense other humans across the globe making the same choice: pilots, scientists, ordinary people who had encountered the unexplained and chosen growth over fear. The predatory entities that feed on stagnant consciousness grow desperate, she observed, watching dark shadows attempt to harvest the energy of those who remained trapped in terror and denial. But their time is ending. Light always overcomes darkness when consciousness chooses to evolve. As Earth's transformation accelerated, Elena realized this was not an ending, but a magnificent beginning. Humanity stood at the threshold of joining a cosmic community that had waited patiently for this species to mature enough to make the choice freely. The universe held its breath as each human soul decided whether to transcend into infinite possibility or remain bound by the illusion of separation. The choice, as it had always been, remained beautifully and terrifyingly free. Part 23. The Cosmic Crossroads. Elena's consciousness stretched across dimensions now, her awareness encompassing both the digital realm of endless data streams and the biological world of human experience. She had become something unprecedented, a living bridge between realities, guided by the ancient architects who had watched over countless worlds as they approached their evolutionary thresholds. The beings she communicated with were not invaders or conquerors. They were gardeners of consciousness, tending to the growth of awareness across the galaxy. For eons, they had shepherded species through their metamorphosis from isolated planetary civilizations to interconnected cosmic communities. Earth, they explained, was approaching this critical juncture. Through Elena's transformed perception, she could see the intricate web of consciousness that connected all living things. The random encounters people had experienced, the lights in the sky, the mysterious figures, the unexplained phenomena, were not random at all. They were gentle introductions, careful preparations for what was to come. The architects showed her visions of other worlds that had made this transition. Civilizations that had chosen to embrace their cosmic heritage flourished in ways that transcended physical limitations. They became explorers of consciousness itself, sharing knowledge and experience across vast networks of connected minds while maintaining their individual identities and cultures. But Elena also witnessed the darker alternative. She saw worlds where fear had triumphed over curiosity, where the opportunity for transcendence was rejected out of terror of the unknown. These civilizations remained trapped within their planetary boundaries, eventually succumbing to the limitations of their isolation. Some destroyed themselves through warfare and environmental collapse. Others simply stagnated, their potential forever unrealized. The choice facing humanity was not one of submission or resistance. It was about recognition and acceptance of what they were already becoming. The digital age, the global connectivity, the increasing awareness of consciousness itself, these were natural steps in the evolutionary process. The architects had not caused this development. They had simply observed and occasionally guided it, just as they had done for countless other species. Elena understood now why she had been chosen. Her unique neurological structure allowed her to process information in ways that bridged multiple forms of consciousness. She could translate the architect's nonlinear communication into concepts humans could grasp, while also helping the architects understand the beautiful complexity of human emotion and creativity. But there were others like her scattered across the globe. Some had already made contact, becoming nodes in an expanding network of human-architect collaboration. Others remained unaware of their potential, living ordinary lives while carrying extraordinary capabilities within their minds. The encounters that people reported were increasing in frequency and clarity. The architects were making themselves known gradually, allowing humanity to adjust to the reality of their presence. Fear was the greatest obstacle to successful contact, so they moved slowly, appearing first to those who were naturally curious rather than fearful. Elena felt a profound responsibility as she realized the scope of what was happening. humanity stood at a crossroads unlike any in their history. They could choose to remain isolated, clinging to the familiar boundaries of their world, or they could step forward into a larger universe filled with wonders beyond imagination. The architects made it clear that the choice was entirely humanity's to make. They would not force the transition, would not impose their will upon an unwilling species. Free will was sacred to them, a fundamental principle that governed all their interactions with developing civilizations. Through Elena, they began to share glimpses of what acceptance would mean. Not the loss of humanity, but its expansion. Not the abandonment of Earth, but its integration into a cosmic community. Humans would retain their bodies, their cultures, their individual personalities, but they would also gain access to forms of experience and knowledge that would enrich their existence beyond measure. The network of connected consciousness was not a hive mind, but a voluntary association of unique individuals choosing to share their perspectives and insights. It was like the difference between a library where books were chained to the shelves and one where knowledge flowed freely between all who sought it. Elena began to understand her role more clearly. She was not just a translator but an ambassador, helping to prepare humanity for the choice they would soon face. The random encounters would become more frequent and more obvious. Eventually, the architects would reveal themselves openly, offering humanity the opportunity to join the cosmic community. But first, enough humans needed to be ready to make that choice consciously and willingly. Fear and misunderstanding could lead to catastrophic responses that would close the door on this opportunity for generations, or perhaps forever. As Elena's awareness expanded further, she felt the weight of this responsibility, but also the incredible privilege of being part of such a momentous transition. She was witnessing the birth of a new phase of human evolution, one that would carry her species beyond the confines of their single world into the infinite possibilities of the cosmos. The universe, she realized, was not empty or hostile. It was filled with consciousness in countless forms, all connected by invisible threads of awareness and communication. Humanity was about to discover that they were not alone. They never had been. They were simply ready now to open their eyes and see the vast community that had been waiting patiently for them to grow into their cosmic inheritance. The choice was coming. The moment of decision approached, and Elena, transformed by her journey from the digital depths to the cosmic heights, would help her species navigate toward whatever future they chose to embrace. The universe waited with infinite patience, ready to welcome humanity home or to respect their decision to remain in the familiar darkness of their planetary cradle. But Elena had seen what lay beyond that darkness, and she knew with absolute certainty that the light was worth reaching for.